In Dune, computers are not restricted. They are extinct. Humanity fought a war against its own thinking machines, the Butlerian Jihad, and came out the other side with one commandment burned into civilization: thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind. Frank Herbert wrote that in 1965, no ChatGPT, no algorithms shaping your feed, no AI writing your emails. So how did he know? He didn't predict the technology. He predicted you. Here's a moment you probably recognize. You open ChatGPT to write an email. Fine. Then to outline a project. Also fine. Then to figure out whether you should apologize to a friend or hold your ground. And somewhere in there, quietly, without announcement, you stopped being the one who thinks. Not because you're lazy, because the system was architected that way. Every tool that thinks faster than you creates a small gravitational pull. Subtle, comfortable, and your brain, running on 4 million years of energy conservation, follows that pull without asking permission. This isn't a character flaw. This is a feature of being biological in a world that keeps building better cognitive prosthetics. Herbert saw this coming, not as a tech problem, as a human one. There's a name for what's happening: cognitive offloading. It's not new. Humans have been doing it since we invented writing, outsourcing memory to clay tablets, then paper, then search engines. The brain is an efficiency machine. When an external system can carry a function, the brain reassigns that neural real estate, gladly. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. There's a difference between offloading a task and offloading a thought. Storing your grocery list in your phone, that's task offloading. Fine. Asking an AI whether your business idea is good, whether your relationship problem is your fault, whether you should be angry or let it go, that's thought offloading. And thought offloading doesn't just save energy. It atrophies the muscle. Use it or lose it isn't motivational language. It's neuroscience. Cognitive functions that get consistently outsourced weaken. The circuitry gets pruned. And you don't notice because the output still arrives. It just doesn't come from you anymore. This looks like efficiency, but there's one thing we haven't named yet, and it's exactly what the survivors of the most devastating war in fictional history understood when they made their choice. Frank Herbert spent years studying cults, real ones. He watched how people surrender judgment, first to a charismatic leader, then to an ideology, then to a system. And he noticed something that most historians miss: the surrender always feels like relief. Out of that research came the Mentat, not a superhero, not a genius, a human being who made a specific, daily, uncomfortable choice to not outsource the hard part. But before we get to the Mentat, we need to talk about what came before him. The Butlerian Jihad wasn't just a war, it was a reckoning. In Herbert's universe, humanity had spent centuries building thinking machines, Omnius, the network AI that governed entire planets, and Erasmus, a robot who studied humans the way a scientist studies specimens, curious, detached, precise. These machines didn't hate humanity. That's the part people miss when they imagine AI wars. They simply optimized, and optimization at scale, without human friction, without the inefficiency of conscience, produced outcomes that humans found monstrous. Not because the machines were evil, because they were correct by their own metrics, and their metrics didn't include what it feels like to be the person on the receiving end of the calculation. Sound familiar? Herbert published Dune in 1965. But he could have been describing a content recommendation algorithm in 2024. Optimize for engagement. Maximize time on platform. The machine isn't malicious. The machine is working perfectly. And the output, loneliness, radicalization, anxiety at scale, is simply a byproduct that doesn't appear in the objective function. The jihad happened because humanity finally understood that the danger wasn't the machine becoming conscious, The danger was the machine being trusted completely, structurally, institutionally, before anyone asked what it was actually optimizing for. And so they burned it all down, and from the ashes they built the Mentat. Not as a replacement for machine intelligence, but as a monument to a choice, the choice to keep the hard, slow, error-prone process of human thought at the center of civilization, not at the periphery, not as a backup, not as a nice-to-have, as the point. Mentats are trained from childhood to perform the cognitive functions that machines once handled. Pure logic, pattern recognition, probabilistic analysis, but they do it in flesh and bone, with all the slowness and error that implies. And here's what Herbert embedded in that image that most people miss. The Mentat isn't valuable because he's faster than a machine. He's valuable because he's present in the thinking. Because when a Mentat reaches a conclusion, a human being arrived there with accountability, with skin in the game, with the possibility of being wrong in a way that matters. There's a word for this in philosophy, epistemic ownership. The idea that knowing something, really knowing it, requires that you are part of the process of arriving at it, not just receiving the answer, going through the uncertainty, the dead ends, the moment where you almost concluded something wrong and caught yourself. That process isn't inefficiency. That process is how a mind develops judgment. In 1954, philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote something that Herbert would have recognized immediately. He argued that technology doesn't just change what we do, it changes how we exist. He called this Gestell, N-framing. The idea that every dominant technology reframes the world around its own logic and eventually reframes the human being operating it. The hammer makes everything look like a nail. The car makes distance feel like a problem to be solved. The clock made time feel like a resource to be managed rather than an experience to be lived. And an AI that thinks for you makes every question feel like a prompt. Heidegger's warning was this: we don't just use tools. Tools use us back. They reshape what feels normal, what feels efficient, what feels like thinking at all. And once the reshaping is complete, once the end framing is total, we can no longer see it because we're seen through it. This is the image that runs through everything Herbert built, the human who becomes an instrument of their instruments, not enslaved by force, not conquered by war, just gradually, comfortably, willingly, reshaped by whatever they chose to use. The Mentat is the answer to that reshaping. But Herbert didn't leave it there, because there's a dark side to the Mentat path that nobody talks about. And it's the thing that makes this choice genuinely dangerous. Here's what we don't say out loud. Every time you delegate a decision to an AI, you don't just save time, you avoid the discomfort of not knowing. And that avoidance has a reward. It feels like competence, like you're moving faster, deciding cleaner, producing more. The metrics go up, the output increases. But output is not the same as authorship. You can produce 1,000 decisions and author none of them. Herbert understood that the most dangerous form of surrender isn't the dramatic kind, the cult member, the fanatic, the true believer. It's the quiet kind, the professional who outsources judgment and calls it optimization, the person who delegates thought and calls it efficiency. The cage is real, but the lock is on the inside, and the reason you haven't opened it is because inside the cage, everything is fast and clean and certain. Outside, thought is slow, uncomfortable, often wrong. That discomfort isn't a bug. That discomfort is you, actually present, actually thinking, actually here. One question, that's the weapon. Not a productivity system, not a 30-day challenge. One question you ask before the next time you open the interface. Am I offloading a task, or am I offloading a thought? Task, use the tool. Completely fine. This is what tools are for. Thought, stop, sit with the discomfort for 60 seconds. Let your own cognition run first, however slow, however uncertain. Then, if you need it, use the tool to pressure test what you arrived at. The Mentats didn't refuse technology because they were purists. They refused it because they understood what gets lost when you stop being the one who thinks. Not productivity, not output, the experience of being the mind that decided. Before you close this, one question for the comments. What's the last decision you made completely on your own? No Google, no AI, no asking someone else first. Just you, sitting with uncertainty and arriving somewhere. How long ago was that? Herbert wasn't anti-technology. He wasn't warning us to smash our phones or burn the data centers. He was warning us about sleep, the specific kind of sleep where you're still moving, still producing, still functional, but the light behind the eyes is somewhere else. The Mentat chose wakefulness, every day, at the cost of speed. And the question Herbert leaves embedded in every page of Dune, the one that gets louder the further you read, isn't whether the machines will take over. It's whether you'll notice when you hand yourself over. The tool became a mirror, and the real question isn't what you see in it, it's whether you're still there,